And I think Philip is watching the chat, so if there are any questions to pop them in the chat, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Great. And I will touch on the experimental processes that I use. So that's the shutter drag and cyanotype, but I'll talk more about that at the end. So I quickly stole this photo from my dad's Instagram because I couldn't find a photo of their garden. So I was born in India. I grew up in Auckland, and in 2018 I moved south with my husband, lived briefly in Dunedin, and then we settled in Palmerston. So I've always been quite introverted, and as a child I spent a lot of time reading and a lot of time in our garden. And our garden was a pretty conventional suburban garden for the most part. It was flowers and shrubs. Living in Auckland suburbia, there wasn't a lot of wildlife other than the common garden birds, so things like blackbirds and sparrows. We did get the occasional hedgehog, which was very exciting. And at the time, what we consider to be garden pests, so things like slugs and snails and ants and spiders, which obviously I don't see as pests anymore, but at the time that's what they were. And the reason I go back this far is because a lot of my introduction to wildlife, particularly the insects, was through books. So, you know, stories like Wind in the Willows, fairy tales, Aesop's fables, they all had characters that were animals that were alongside human characters. And I think this that's sort of where this kind of blending happened of sort of the fantasy and reality. And I think that was further instilled with Māori cultural stories that often personify elements of nature, like mountains and rivers. And so quite often when you see my photos, you will see the animals up close and personal. And that's because that's how I see them. And my first solo photography exhibition was built around this concept. It was a collection of butterfly portraits plus the magpie moth, which is a day-flying moth, at the Dunedin Botanic Gardens. And the whole idea of that was that we see butterflies, we see their beautiful wing patterns and their colours, but we don't necessarily see them eye to eye. Quite often we can't. So the idea was to help people relate to them through portraits, not just as pretty flying things, but as fellow inhabitants of planet Earth. And the original 6 photos from that exhibition are in the museum exhibition as well, and they are alongside pin specimens from the museum collection to show the life size of each of the butterflies as well. So to add this to this sort of fantasy reality fairy tale garden thing that was going on, many of the animals that I had been introduced to in books, I hadn't actually come across in real life. And I did write this on the blurb in the museum exhibition. The first time I saw a dragonfly, I was 22 years old. It was at Tongariro, and it was sort of hovering over this creek, and even at 22, I might as well have seen a fairy for how excited I was to see this dragonfly. So all of this is to put in context the perspective that I bring to my photography, particularly of wildlife. And when I talk about the magic of nature, or I've often sort of referred to my garden as a fairy tale garden, it's almost a literal statement. Maddie, I was going to put the Oath of the Horatii, but I I thought I would just keep my own work in here. So my photography is also influenced by knowledge and experience in other artistic disciplines. So in my high school years, I steadily developed an interest in visual art. By 7th form, I was taking practical art, art history, and classical studies, which had a big focus on art as well. And we were really fortunate that we got to study quite a wide range of movements and styles from different teachers who had different specialties. And I also got to learn a lot about how to analyze an artwork, thinking about formal elements like composition and color and line, but also thinking about the concept behind the work, the socio-political context, and also how the artist's life experience influenced their work. So in my last year of high school, I was accepted into a Bachelor of Visual Arts, but I dropped out quite early on. My intention was to do a teaching diploma after that, so I went straight into the teaching degree. But it took me a long time to come back to painting after that. So I did finish the teaching degree, but I only did a couple of years of teaching before I burnt out. And I think this was the first time, or that was the first time that I realized how important having a creative practice was for my well-being. So I ended up doing after-school tutoring and really enjoyed that. But of course, that also meant that I was only working afternoons and I had time for a creative practice again. So my 20s was a decade of trying lots of different things and coming back to a creative practice. But my main focus was writing and publishing, particularly children's books. That led to colouring books, and by starting to draw again, I started to get back into painting. And that was the first time that I had painted just for me. I wasn't thinking about what my teachers would think or whether it was a strong enough concept or what mark it would get. It was just me putting my emotions on the canvas, really. And I ended up creating a collection of works and had my first solo painting exhibition. And just as an aside, since I've got you all, I'm having my second ever solo painting exhibition later this year. And unsurprisingly, the theme is the joy of the garden with a focus on wildlife. So by the end of my 20s, I had started to settle into this sort of parallel career. So with teaching and teaching on one side and basically being a creative. So that was writing and art on the other, and between arts and education, there's a lot of crossover in between. So at this time, my husband and I moved south. So we lived briefly in Dunedin, and then we bought our first home in Palmerston. So this is the kowhai tree that was outside my rental in Dunedin, which the kiruru and the tui really loved. So the first few years were really stressful for lots of different reasons. And that meant I had to close my creative business, my sort of centering around writing at a time when I felt like it was just starting to build momentum. But more than the closure of the business was that I had a very limited creative practice. So that was a very low point for me. But for the first time in my life, I had my own garden. And the garden sort of became my sanctuary. So we have an acre. It's a very, very big garden. And as I spent more time in the garden, I started discovering more of the wildlife that we have here in New Zealand. So obviously we do have all the common garden birds, the sparrows and blackbirds and song thrush, but we also get a lot of tui. We have harakeke and kowhai, and of course when they flower, the tui come. We get a lot of piwakawaka, and these are birds that are in Auckland as well, but we didn't see them in our own garden as much. And korimako, again, who really love both the harakeke and the kowhai when they're in bloom. But I also started learning more about the small introduced birds, which I just hadn't really taken the time to notice or learn about. And particularly as I got more and more into photography, noticing the insects and the spiders. So this is a nursery web spider. It lays its eggs in this nursery web and will not move from the web until the eggs have hatched. And then all the little bugs and worms and beetles and things that keep our soil healthy. So photography became a really good tool for me, not just from an art perspective, but also being able to better ID these animals that I was discovering. So I think that in this case, there are two types of people when it comes to goal setting, and I'm one of those people that always sets goals around the new year. So I'd sort of reflect on the year before and have a think about what I'd like to do in the year coming. And at the start of 2020, I looked back on the year and kind of felt like I had nothing to show. I didn't really feel like I'd learned anything new or achieved anything that felt, good to me. I was just kind of busy surviving the day to day. And I was still kind of feeling that sense of failure from having to close the business. And because writing and painting were such a big part of the business, they were sort of tainted with that feeling as well. But I knew that I needed something creative. And thinking back, remembered that, I'd always kind of been interested in photography. But when I was in high school, film was really still the way to go for any kind of decent camera. And, with the ongoing cost of developing film, I never quite got into that. But I thought, by 2020, surely there'll be something. And I found this entry-level Canon on Trade Me, and it came with a bag and a memory card and a few other bits and pieces. And my plan was to use my camera to explore my new hometown and surroundings, and then, learn how to use manual across the way. I was particularly interested in landscapes and sort of close-up natural abstracts, which I'll show a couple later on. So this is one of the first sort of photo walks I went on. If you know Palmerston, we've got this hill, Poketapu, which is the landmark, and there's a trail to walk up it. So this was just before sunset from the sides of Poketapu, and a couple of weeks before lockdown. So I got my camera in February 2020, and of course in March 2020 in New Zealand we had the biggest lockdown, or the strictest lockdown that we had, and so all the photography plans got cancelled. But of course, in retrospect, it actually turned out to be a really good thing for me, for my photography, because I was forced to find photographs where I wouldn't have even looked for them before. I wasn't really interested in photographing the garden except as documenting the process. But when the garden became the only place that I was allowed to go, I had to find photos there if that's what I was going to learn. So that helped me creatively in terms of trying to find interesting things where it's not obviously interesting. Like if I went out to Shag Point, for example, where there's this colony of fur seals. Fur seals are the obvious subject, or it's on the east coast, so sunrise would be an obvious subject as well. But in the garden, other than flowers, maybe there aren't necessarily obvious subjects. And the other good thing with lockdown was that a lot of photographers who ran workshops in person weren't running them anymore, because even the countries that didn't really have lockdowns, people weren't really going out in crowds and things as much. So a lot of these photographers put their workshops online, and quite often they were free. And so I sort of overnight had the opportunity to learn from some of the best photographers in the world. And one of the really good things that has come out of COVID is that because people have gotten used to streaming workshops and talks, that's happening a lot more. So even from Palmerston, I have a lot of access to ongoing learning in photography, which is fantastic. And I put most of my learning down to YouTube. But what YouTube doesn't offer is feedback. And at the time, again, that felt like a real drawback. But in retrospect, it gave me a chance to edit my work according to my own tastes, and editing in terms of even just like selecting the photos that I wanted to keep or share, not just the processing of them. And I think this is where my education in art and art history came into play as well, because I had knowledge of composition and colour theory, and even I think the sort of mental visual library of the different art and artists that exist, and how I can take elements from paintings and sculptures and other things and bring that into my photography. And I think the other benefit is that I didn't know the rules of photography, so I just broke a lot of rules because I didn't realize I was breaking them. And I think if I'd been a member of a camera club and gotten feedback early on, that my photography would look quite different to what it does today. So I've called this section New Life because it's new to me life, things that I either hadn't seen or I hadn't seen much before moving to Palmerston, and a whole lot of animals that I didn't even know existed, or species that I didn't know existed in New Zealand. So I'm going to share some of the ones that are in the exhibition, the stories behind the photos, but also if there are any pieces that you have seen at the exhibition that you want me to talk about specifically, I can do that as well at the end. So this is a New Zealand grasshopper. I didn't know we had New Zealand grasshoppers, but I also didn't know that they look so cute close up. So that's something really lovely about close-up photography, is you actually get to see their faces. So from the first days in my garden, I started learning to identify the birds, and I started learning their names both in English and Te Reo Māori. So this is the riroriro, the grey warbler. And the first time I saw this one, I thought it was a fantail with its tail chopped off, because it's about the same size and it sort of moves around the same way that a fantail moves. And, you know, with the naked eye, I couldn't really see the colour difference because they're quite far up. They tend to hang out at the tops of trees a lot. And photography meant that I could actually see the detail, so I could see the light colour of the feathers, I could see the black and white tail feathers, and I could see the red eye. So this is the photo of the grey warbler, or the riroriro, that I have in the exhibition. And it's one of the first photos that I did any sort of significant editing to, which was to convert it to black and white, and I added a gradient from the bottom because in the back is all my garden mess that I hadn't packed up. So I just wanted to kind of get rid of that mess a bit. And just going back to the point on camera clubs, this was an early-ish photo for me, and what I love about it is the backlighting. And when I shared it in Camera Club later on, the comment that I got was that the eye isn't very obvious in the head, and if I lightened the bird, the eye would be more obvious. So I did try that, and what happened when I lightened the bird, of course, is that the backlighting became less obvious, and that for me was the whole point of the photo. But again, I think if I'd been given that feedback in the very early days of my photography, I might have taken it without sort of considering my taste as much. So this is one of my personal favourite photos still. This is a kahu, a swamp harrier or a harrier hawk. They're a new bird. They were a new bird for me, and they'll fly over our garden because we do live quite close to the river. They're actually one of the native New Zealand birds who have done better since agriculture because it's actually easier for them to hunt. And when they're sort of low enough, you can actually see their heads moving from side to side looking for prey while their bodies are completely still. So this photo was taken sort of an early winter morning. I was working at the local pharmacy and I was so drained after work that I didn't have time for photography or didn't have the energy for photography anymore. So I decided that I was going to try and go out in the morning instead. So I'm about a 10-minute walk away from the Waihemo, the Dwindle River. So I thought I'll walk down there, see what I see. It was quite foggy, but once the fog sort of cleared a bit, then you started getting the lovely sunrise colours coming through. And then this kahu started flying over, and I just sort of did my best to try and capture it, and then I had to go to work, so I couldn't even see if I'd got the photo or not until I got back in the evening. And what I really love about this photo is like that was a really lovely morning, and it felt really good to be able to get that creative time in, even with the day job. And for me, this is a very calm but also an energizing photo, and that's very much how I felt that morning. So it felt good to be able to find a photo that really reflected how I felt at the time of taking it. So beyond birds, and this is slightly embarrassing, but I didn't know that we had any butterflies other than the monarch and the cabbage white in New Zealand. And I was working in the garden and I saw this butterfly and I knew it wasn't a monarch, but I hadn't seen anything like it before. So I sort of did Google searches until I worked out what it was. And it was this, it was a kahu kōwhai, or a yellow admiral. And it was on a patch of stinging nettles, which are the host plant for the kahu kōwhai and also the kahu kura. So just in case there's anyone else who doesn't know how many butterflies we have, the Moths and Butterflies Trust list 19 species of New Zealand butterflies, and then there are additional 7 that are occasional migrants, so they blow over from places like Australia. So this is another native butterfly. This is Zizina oxlei, the southern blue or the New Zealand blue. So this specific species is only found in the eastern part of the South Island. But there is the little blue as well, which is found throughout New Zealand. And then there's a long-tailed blue, which is found further up north. So these are tiny. They're about the size of a 20-cent coin. They fly very low to the ground and quite hard to spot. But once you start sort of spotting their pattern, it gets easier. But one year we had a lot in the garden, and we've sort of got this patch of grass that had lots of cat's ear flowers. And if I lay down there and waited, then I'd be able to get some close up, which is how I got the one there on the left. And like a lot of butterflies, when their wings are closed, I don't want to use the word drab, but they look a bit drab, which is good camouflage, obviously. And then when they open their wings, you get this lovely blue-purple gem-like colour, and it does even kind of shimmer in the sun. So that one was taken at Macrae's, what's the word, wetland, Macrae's wetland walk, where we have a lot of blues, and we also have a lot of tussock butterflies. So moving beyond the garden to our greater backyard is the hoiho, or the yellow-eyed penguin, um, which have become my favourite penguin. So near me we have Tavora Reserve. It's about a 10-minute drive from the sort of main township of Palmerston. It's owned and managed by the Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust. There's a walking track and a beach. The beach is closed off from 3 o'clock because of the hoi horsey humans. They won't come back to their nest from sea. And it's also closed during the breeding season, so approximately October to February, to give them the space and privacy that they need for that. So I haven't actually seen penguins there myself yet, but I have seen plenty of other wildlife. And while their main focus is looking after the hoiho, who are extremely endangered and declining year on year, they do also have a secondary focus to support the other New Zealand wildlife as well. Where I have seen them in the wild is at Bushy Beach, just south of Oamaru. Like Tavora Reserve, excuse me, the beach is closed off in the afternoon, but they have a lookout that's quite high up and far away from the main beach, where you can watch them come in without bothering them at all. So that's a lovely spot to see them in the wild. But this photo was taken at a place called the Opera in Dunedin. So this was in their penguin rehab facility. So it's all fenced off, and they are rightly very strict about noise levels and how close you can get. But it means that you get to see penguins very close up, but also behaving quite naturally. So this is a pair of hoiho. They pair up and they often preen each other. So that's what they're doing here, is preening each other's feathers. So I'm just going to touch on experimental photography because I don't know how many photographers there are and I don't want to get too technical. But there are two types of experimental, or I guess, yeah, for lack of a better word, experimental photography in the exhibition. One is shutter drag, which is the blurred light, the big bag moth photo, and the other is cyanotype printing, which is these blue images. So this is in English, the common bag moth, and in Māori there are lots of names. One of the names is Pua Rokotori, which is named after Hine Rokotori, who is the goddess of flute music. And the story goes that she was so in love with her flute that she decided to live inside it, and that's the bag moth. So the idea with this photo was to reference music through the blurred light. So I'll just, really briefly, but if anyone wants me to go in detail, I can do that. So you start with a still subject, you have a light on the subject and a slow shutter speed, with the flash set to rear sync so that the flash fires at the end of the exposure. So by moving the camera, that blurs the light or blurs the subject, and then when the flash goes off at the end, it makes this sharp image. And then I've also used a coloured gel, which are just pieces of coloured plastic that go on the flash, and it just means the flash has a colour to it. I did look that up, why it's called gel, and it used to be called made out of gelatin, but prior to that, in Shakespearean days, they used to use a glass of wine to shine the light through to create a colour cast. And cyanotype printing. So this is a very old process. So it was invented / discovered in the 1800s. And the process is still exactly the same as it was in those days. except you can now get the two solutions in plastic bottles from Spotlight, rather than having to do whatever you had to do in those days to get them. So you can get pre-coated paper, which means it's even, but I coat the solution on paper myself, partly because it means I get to choose nice watercolor paper to use, which brings the blue out a little bit more. It also gives me variation, so you can see in the slug cyanotype, the blue isn't solid, and that variation in the blue, I think, makes the work more interesting. But with the P Waka Waka image there, you can see that you can also actually paint with the solution, and the brush marks there I've been able to line up with the feathers, and you can make the work quite interesting that way. So the process for this, it's all non-toxic stuff, so children can do it. You don't need gloves or anything. It's 2 iron salts, so it starts out green. Once you mix the 2 solutions together, it starts out green. And then I've put them outside under glass with a negative. So I make digital negatives rather than a film negative. So I convert the image to black and white and invert it to swap the blacks and the whites around to make a digital negative. And it's like the old OHP, the old overhead transparency papers that we had in school. That's all it is. So it's just printed onto those. So they start out this green color and then they go blue. And then the blue completely pretty much goes away except for the bits that aren't exposed. And then when you rinse them off, everything that wasn't exposed gets rinsed off in the water, and then they turn blue. And it does take, another sort of 12 to 24 hours for that blue color to really develop. But that's the process for that. And that color lasts indefinitely. If it's kept in very, very bright light, it might fade a little bit. But if you put it into a dark place for a few days, the color comes back again. So it's a wonderful process. And the reason it hasn't changed in 200 years is because the process worked so well, and it continues to. So those are the cyanotypes that are in the exhibition. And the other, what I think is a lovely thing about them is that depending on the day, what the sunlight was like, whether it was winter or summer or cloudy or bright, the exposure time varies, but the color varies as well. So some of them are a much lighter blue, some of them are a much deeper blue, and that's reflected, or that reflects what the quality of the light was on the day of the exposure. So I'll hand back to you, Philip.
Kia ora, great, thanks so much. I've been living with these works every working day, which has been wonderful, and just getting this background for me has been personally really good, just to find out more about where the images have come from, and to learn a little bit more about cyanotype prints. It's interesting because there's not too many people here that know me, but one or two who do will know that I have a very strong interest in invertebrates, and I was delighted with the quality of imagery in Zenobia's photographs in the exhibition of those little guys, whether it's a little southern or New Zealand blue, or a grasshopper, or a cyanotype leaf-veined slug. It's all wonderful stuff. But yeah, it's also it's not just, I mean, it sounds terrible to say this, just photography. It's wonderful documentary photography, but then Zenobia, you've taken it and made it into something else. And the other thing I'd point out too, just how it came about that we had the exhibition in the museum, is a year or two ago, I saw via the New Zealand Moths, Butterflies and Moths Trust, I think on their website, that you were doing an exhibition in Dunedin of
Yeah.
the butterfly images that you mentioned earlier. And I thought,
Mm.
ooh, that'll be a good one to get up here, because I was always on the lookout for nice, easy exhibitions where we didn't have to do too much work. In other words, curate them ourselves. So a pre-packaged exhibition was going to be a really good thing. Now, there's a question here from Priscilla Southcombe. Have you found that other people have different reactions to photography as a medium as opposed to other art forms like painting? And then what skills do you think are most important or have been most important to you in your journey as a photographer?
So yes is the first answer. I do feel sometimes like I need to fight photography to be considered an art, the way that a painting would automatically be considered one. And there are, quite a few exhibitions and things where actually photography isn't allowed. Yeah, yes. Um, and there are different reasons for that. The reason that I accept and understand is that unless you're doing a one-off-one print, a photograph can be printed many times. So you may have an open edition and a limited edition, whereas a painting, there is only one and that's it, unless you recreate it. But even then, it's not the same. Um, so that I understand. But I think, especially nowadays, where we all have a cell phone in our pockets with a camera that is, actually pretty good. There is also, I think, that skill thing where a lot of people can't necessarily, well, a lot of people may see a painting and know that they couldn't paint that necessarily. Um, but with photos, I think there is sometimes that idea that, oh, I could take that, so therefore it isn't. And I'm sounding a lot more negative and cynical than I actually am, because on the other hand, like I think what I said at the very, very start, which is that our experience and our perspective is everything that how we see the world comes through in our work very naturally. And I think that's very true for photography as well. Um, and I think actually, well, the technical skill that's most important for photography was the exposure triangle, which took me forever to get my head around, which is balancing aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And every time you change one, it affects the other. But that's how you um, get a particular effect. So if I wanted to capture something fast moving, I would have to make sure I had a fast shutter speed, but that would make the image darker. So I would need to then change my aperture and my ISO to balance that out, and everything, affects each other. So technically the exposure triangle. But I think actually what's been most important for me as a photographer is trusting my own taste. And so when I go through images and pick ones that I like, I was saying the other day, I'm studying at the moment. I'm just about to finish, and I have a mentor as part of that study. And I was saying to her, I don't actually do very well in photography competitions, because my work isn't always technically, or actually often isn't technically perfect. But I will quite often choose the image that I think is more beautiful or more interesting over what is technically correct. So I think, yeah, just trusting my own taste. Mm.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that would be
Priscilla.
something that I would certainly second from what I've seen of your work through the exhibition and the other material that I know you've got, and even some of what we've
Mm.
seen tonight. There is technical photography. There is what I call documentary photography, but then
Yeah.
there's a different approach taken when it's coming at it from an art form as opposed to snapping a shot or trying to simply document something, which is probably what I find myself doing in a museum setting. We just want to get a nice clean shot of whatever it is.
Yes,
Whereas
exactly.
yeah, I get what you're saying about the motivation there,
Mm.
um, and instilling a sense of yourself. Um, yeah. Any other, oh, Ruth's typing, but anyone else got any questions? I mean, you can even turn your mic on and say something
Yeah,
if you want. It's
yeah.
an open
There's a
forum,
small
folks.
enough group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Maddie.
just going to ask a question. Um, so I like what I'm kind of interested or curious to know is like what you were talking about earlier was
Mm.
like uh like how your motivations for doing a lot of the like insects and
Mm.
bugs and butterflies was kind of drawn from like was rooted in like your childhood experiences and then like sort of and then your later experience,
Yeah.
the adult experiences. Um, and like I was quite fascinated about how um, you were bringing to light like features of those insects that like we don't often like get to see, you know, close
Yeah.
up. And so what I'm curious to know is like, do you see yourself continuing with that, or do you see yourself like where or going in a different direction, like
Yeah. I
for
think
your
the I think it's both of the above. I at the moment, well, at the moment actually I'm doing a lot of painting and less photography.
okay,
Um, but what I'm very interested in is still life photography, so in a studio setting,
okay,
um, and playing more with that shutter drag, blurred light stuff.
right,
But I have never tired of photographing insects.
yeah, yeah,
So no matter what else I've tried doing,
mm-hmm.
I seem to always come back to that. And
Okay,
you know, when I feel like I'm in a creative block or I just haven't done any photography for a while, the thing that gets me back into it is going outside
yeah,
and photographing in the garden. Yeah.
cool.
So I don't think that's going anywhere. Yeah.
That's very good to hear.
Mm.
Anyone else got any questions or comments they'd like to make?
Thank you, Ruth. I think I'm such an emotional person that I can't help but put emotion into my work as well. And I think that um, one thing that I guess makes my photography unique in this area is that I'm one of the few people that get really excited about seeing these insects and these animals that are so completely new to me.
Yeah.
And just thrilling for me. I remember once when I was at the pharmacy Monday morning, and my colleague said, "Oh, did you do anything exciting on the weekend?" And I said, "Yes, I saw a blue butterfly in my garden for the first time." Just like, okay. But that's what I can bring to East Otago.
Long may
Yeah.
that keep happening. Yeah, it's hard to get people passionate about small creatures, isn't it? I have to say too, on a personal note, when I was looking at Zenobia's exhibition as we set it up, and I saw the blue butterfly, it immediately evoked a memory I had as a small boy in our primary school here in Timaru, growing up, playing on the playground and seeing what I thought was this beautiful little blue moth. It turned out it was the
Mm,
small blue, but I just remember being impressed by it, and I'm sure that was one of the many formative experiences I had with a small insect. I was lucky I started young. Um,
yes.
yeah, I still feel that sense of wonder when I see your images, Zenobia.
Mm,
Again, I feel that again, simply because I'm seeing it from a different viewpoint. I've seen so many
yeah.
grasshoppers, but it's another thing to stare them in the face, as I am
Yeah.
with the portrait in the exhibition.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions from folks?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Zenobia. I think your pictures are absolutely fantastic. The photographs are brilliant. I have no problems about seeing them as art and something that I could never do. Just got a quick question. Do you actually have a website?
I do. I do have a website. I'll pop it in the comments, but it's dwindleriver.com. So I am
Oh, right.
Dwindle River on everything. I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook, but
And can you
yeah.
actually buy and sell on that website? Can people buy?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so at the moment, I have a studio session booked next week to take some better photos of my work, because at the moment, as a photographer, I'm very embarrassed that I have bad product photos on my website. So that's in the works. But there are there are either there is a portfolio and there is links to the work, and for the pieces that are at other places like the museum, there's a link to those galleries and museums as well. Yeah,
Well,
thank you for asking.
no, you're a very talented young woman.
Thank you very much.
And of course, that's why we simply had to have the exhibition in the museum. Any other comments or questions at this stage?
Yeah, I've got another one. So Zenobia, like, I mean, this is kind of like a hot topic, but like, have you had anyone sort of like, I don't know, like, accuse like your work of being AI generated, or like, are there any kind of like, do you have any fears around that, or like, I don't know, what's the
Yeah.
kind of
I mean, I think, knee-jerk reaction to seeing AI generated images when they first started coming through was definitely, there was some fear there around, you know, what's going to happen with not just photography, but with art in general as well. But I think as it's gone on, I'm just focusing more on what I bring to the photography and just going back to that, my perspective, my emotions, even because over the years I've learned a lot about these animals as well. So everything that I bring to it that AI could never ever bring to it. And yeah, where AI goes, I don't know what that's going to look like. And I have had people accuse me of over editing. But again, again, my knee-jerk reaction was to get a bit defensive. But on reflection, um, I edit to the point that I think it looks beautiful, or I think it looks like what I see, which isn't necessarily reality, but it's how I see it. And as long as I'm comfortable with the finished image and what I've done and not lying about it, then I'm happy with that. And people are entitled to their opinions.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just going on from that, like, it seems a bit unfair that like photography would be more like what's the word, vulnerable to those like accusations, like you could say that editing is part of any artistic process, right? Regardless of like, whether it's like writing or like, painting or whatever. And so it's kind of like um where am I going with that
Yeah,
train of
I
thought?
think if I can just, So I think one of the reasons that photography is so susceptible to that is because we do see a lot of images that are over edited. I mean, things where the whole sky is swapped out for something else, and photoshopped things, and that does, and again with AI as well, I think that does build mistrust in people, because if they've seen a photo before and then found out, oh, actually that wasn't really the photo, they will sort of second guess things. But and that all comes back to, I just have to be happy with what I'm doing, and let the cards fall where they may, I suppose. Some people will get it and some people won't, and that's true of anything. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well, it looks like we're coming to the end of our presentation tonight, or this morning. So, yeah, thank you so much on behalf of all of us, Zenobia, for taking the time to do this presentation and to prepare it for us. I'm sure all of us have enjoyed it and found it fascinating just seeing or finding out more about, the work and the thought and even the emotion that goes in behind the work that we're looking at. That's been fantastic. For anyone who is within striking distance of Timaru, you have until the 26th of July to check out the exhibition. We'd love to have you come in and have a look. And of course, some of the works, well, all of the works are for sale. Some have been purchased already, but there still are a few left, quite a few left. So come on in and check it out. Yes, and Tracy, I just want to say I'm so glad you're able to join us. Tracy is one of our former museum volunteers who's now living in the UK.
Lovely.
Very passionate about New Zealand natural history and spending time in the great outdoors. So really, really good to have
Thank
her
you,
here.
Tracy.
Also, I can't help myself when I've got a captive audience. We've got a new museum coming. Did I mention that at the start? A new museum in Timaru, which will be opening in hopefully April next year, Te Maru, South Canterbury Museum. Our current museum will be closing at Labour Weekend, the end of October. And we look forward to, maybe if we don't see you come into our current museum, we look forward to hosting you in the new museum later next year once things get up and running. So kia ora, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I've also recorded this talk, and that recording will be available. We'll be able to send it from the museum. So if anyone knows of anyone else who might want us to hear it or view it, they'll be able to contact us at the museum, simply museum@timdc.govt.nz. Most of you will have been in touch with us anyway, I think. So that's really, really good. Zenobia, last word, over to you.
Oh, just thank you. Well, thank you all for being here today, but thank you, Philip, for inviting me to exhibit at the museum. It has really felt like a privilege. And if I can say this without sounding arrogant, when I walked into the exhibition, because they kindly hung it all for me and had all the printed works up, I was taken back by how beautiful it all looked, especially with the large scale images. So if you are in or near Timaru driving through, they are open on public holidays. It is very much worth going and actually seeing the work printed and in person and on such a large scale. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all very much. Have a good evening or a good morning over in the UK, and we'll look forward to seeing some of you at least in our premises. Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And I'll stop the recording. And that's done.